Esports. Esports is a new rising form of popular culture that is taking the world by storm. Esports is playing competitive video games at the highest level. Esports was initially ridiculed by the media, but has now become a media craze. It started from just a few thousand viewers to over millions around the world. Today, the prize pool for winning some tournaments can be over $20 million. But the first real form of esports was the game StarCraft in South Korea. It was so huge that over half the population of Korea was playing the game, and it created the first competitive scene where players got contracts. Now, esports are spread across several different games all across the world. In this documentary, we will cover the public perception of esports, lifestyle of pros, popular games, negative aspects of gaming, and money in esports.
Both the media and consumers' view of esports are split basically into two sides. One side believes that esports are a part of the future of entertainment alongside the likes of the NBA and NFL, while not necessarily calling it an actual sport. The other side believes that it's ridiculous to even compare esports to real or traditional sports, and they do not take esports seriously, using arguments such as saying, it's only video games and video games are just for kids. An example of the latter would be Colin Cowherd, a sports analyst, who is very outspoken about his resentment towards video games and esports. On his talk show, The Herd with Colin Cowherd, he has stated that he believes esports is for booger eaters. While there are people in the media that are against esports, like Colin Cowherd, there are also people with media presence who show strong support for it. For example, Celtics player Gordon Hayward has been very vocal about his belief that esports and the players in it should be respected. He's also been involved directly in esports when he joined the analyst desk at a League of Legends playoff tournament, which is their equivalent of an NBA halftime show on TNT. Hayward's also live-streamed himself playing competitive games before. Three-time NBA champion Rick Fox also promotes esports, constantly praising its players, and also has invested heavily into it, since he owns his own organization called Echo Fox, which has teams for many different games, including Call of Duty, Street Fighter, and League of Legends. If you've ever read about esports online, you've probably seen that it's a controversial topic. It's likely that you'll find comments from consumers that both strongly support and strongly oppose esports. Often, those who are against esports' existence say it shouldn't be considered a sport because they are just games and don't require any physical skill, or that watching people play video games is simply a waste of time. Those who support esports say that arguments about physicality are inaccurate because games like golf, darts, and poker are considered sports and are also broadcasted on sports-focused channels like ESPN. They also combat the view that watching people play video games professionally is unusual by using the example that watching others play games like basketball, football, and soccer has been popular in the media for a very long time. While there are conflicting points of view toward esports, it's clear that many consumers and organizations are interested in its growth. Just by looking at the changing crowd sizes exemplifies its growth throughout recent years, showing that the public has grown more and more interested in it. During the League of Legends World Finals in 2011, both its crowd and venue were small. However, as the public perception of esports began to shift towards mostly positive throughout both media and consumers, its popularity rapidly increased, and the large rise of people watching esports live show that. Esports crowds can even be compared to major sports events, and in 2013, the World's Finals were played at Staples Center, where both the Los Angeles Lakers and Clippers play their home games.
An anonymous interview conducted by ESPN with 33 pro League of Legends players from both North American and European leagues were asked several questions regarding their day-to-day lives. Among the various questions, players were asked their base salary, revealing that in North America, players were being paid around $105K, while the European average was $80K. With that being said, it is clear as to why many pursue to become pro gamers. However, there has been a lot of negative criticism towards the professional gamers because they're being referred to as athletes. Much of this criticism stems from the notion that in order to be considered an athlete, one must perform physical activities that improve physical strength. However, professional gamers should in fact be considered athletes. Though gaming may not be as physically straining as lifting or running, it does, however, take a lot of dedication as well as a lot of hours of practice, which has been neglected by the media when it comes to professional gaming. For example, players such as Diego Quaz Rivera from Team Liquid Esports organization has said that being a pro is time restrictive because to stay competitive you can't stop playing. Owner of Team Liquid organization Steve Arsenet has stated that his players wake up at 12 p.m. and stay up until 3 a.m. playing. Though these hours of practice may not be the most physically straining, it can be mentally exhausting. These hours alone should be proof that professional gamers are indeed athletes because of how long and mentally exhausting their regimen can be compared to those who participate in professional sports.
League of Legends is a 3D, third-person, multiplayer online battle arena game developed by Riot Games. It was first released in 2009 and continues to grow in popularity to this very day. It is played by both the casual fan and professional players. Pro leagues can be found in North America, Europe, China, Korea, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia. It has grown into a large community that brings people a sense of achievement and belonging, but it is not perfect. There is still a large gender disparity in the community. It is constantly asked why League of Legends is such a popular game in the esports world. In a study by Yao Yao's son, he looked into the motives for playing esport games, and in this particular case, he looked at League of Legends. He found that the biggest motivation was the sense of achievement this game brings. It is understandable because there are professional players who are seen as icons from where they're from. For example, the player Faker in the Korean leagues is the most well-known player across all League of Legends. He is often seen as the Michael Jordan of League of Legends, and in Korea there are billboards and posters praising him. Like many other sports, there is a regular season and playoffs where teams can win money, trophies, and title of champion for a particular season. So professional players do not just play this game for fun, they play for the sense of achievement it brings. In League of Legends, solo players are basically people who go in and play the game by themselves, whereas pre-made teams means like a group of players joined up beforehand so they can all be on the same team when they play. A study by Verlili Skolitz came to the conclusion that those in pre-made groups get a sense of belonging when they play compared to solo players. This is important to understand esports and gaming in general because it illustrates a psychological aspect to this game. At the core, a video game is meant to bring people joy, and not everyone gets the same joy when they play such a team-based game like League of Legends alone. Solo players just fill an empty slot, while being in a pre-made team means they actively want you to play. A lot of times video games are meant to serve an escape for players. This game does more than that. In a pre-game group, it makes players feel like they are part of something, like they belong. Although League of Legends has illustrated a growing popularity, it still has some faults. As seen in many other games, there is a great disparity in who plays the game. It is dominated generally by males, in professional play and casual play alike. A study by Ratan Rabinda has shown that females gain skill in the same rate as males do, but there is still a large discrepancy as the amount of females who play this game. Also, when females have played alongside male counterparts, they have illustrated less confidence in their skills and focus on males getting better rather than themselves. It is unfair that they are much more excluded when it has been shown that they can bring equal play or even better play than that of males. A professional player in the League of Legends world who actually plays on a team could be a stepping stone for more females to test their skills in gaming and not be afraid of the backlash from men, thus creating an overall better social dynamic in this community.
Overwatch is a team-based game and is one of the most popular multiplayer first-person shooter games to be released in the past 5 years. The game was released in 2016 by Blizzard Entertainment and has one of the highest number of active players among its genre. What separates Overwatch from League of Legends is that it is a first-person shooter, meaning that you play from the point of view of the character instead of looking from above. Additionally, the objectives and tasks of the games are different. There are multiple modes where you have to coordinate as a team to control a certain point or move a payload to a certain destination. The video game has become one of the most popular and successful video games to be released in the past 5 years. Statista.com states that as of October 2017, Overwatch has reached 35 million worldwide players and was ranked 7th for most sold game. Overwatch has one of the most female players in the first-person shooter genre. Historically, first-person shooters have one of the lowest female population, and a reason for this is because of the limited gender diversity within this genre. A research conducted by Dimitri Williams and colleagues called the Virtual Census Representation of Gender, Race, and Age in Video Games. They researched 150 video games across 9 platforms and found that results show a systematic overrepresentations of males, whites, adults, and a systematic underrepresentations of females, Hispanics, Native Americans, children, and elderly. Only 15% of the main characters were female, while the rest were male. Overwatch has double the total female audience than any other first-person shooters. Quantic Foundry, a market research company, stated that 16% of the player base are women, which calculates to 5 million female players. One of the reasons why this game is popular, among women is because of the gender diverse cast of characters. The director, Jeff Kaplan, states in a speech at DICE the importance of making this video game appeal to everybody and to make people feel inclusive. Currently, there are 11 female characters out of 27 that play major roles. Blizzard Entertainment stresses the importance of diversity within this game, and they are releasing new characters to appeal to a wider audience. The game has become so popular among video game enthusiasts that Activision and Blizzard Entertainment decided to create a worldwide competitive league with prizes up to $1 million. The Overwatch League is one of the most followed esports games, with an average of 550,000 views. On the game's debut match, more than 300,000 viewers tuned in to watch the game. ESC, which is a company that collects data and statistics from major streaming services online, recorded approximately 35 million total views in the stage 1 of the competition. When we compare these statistics to other sports, they are not too far away from mainstream sports. Hockey games have been recorded to have roughly 500,000 views, and the Premier League in England has a little more than 1 million views. It is not unrealistic for video games in general to surpass certain sports in views and popularity. There's a lot of community support behind Overwatch and all other esports, and corporations and investors are pushing to televise games nationally. Earlier this year, Blizzard Entertainment and a streaming service called Twitch created a $90 million deal on obtaining rights to stream all Overwatch League games on their website. Additionally, one of the biggest and well-known owners and investors are Robert Kraft, the chief executive officer of the New England Patriots, and New York Mets' Jeff Wilpon. These investors are trying to shape the esports perspective and to make it appreciated at the same level of other sports. Overwatch League also receives a lot of endorsements and sponsors such as Toyota, Intel, T-Mobile, and Sour Patch Kids. Corporations are noticing how profitable esports has become. With all these endorsements and investors in the esports community, they are pushing to televise the Overwatch League. ESPN has posted multiple videos on YouTube and on TV about highlights from esports tournaments. Overwatch is one of the most shown games on their channel. The community and the players in the leagues are getting more recognition and support by the mainstream media. Overall, Overwatch has become one of the best-selling video games with a large supportive community. It appeals to all backgrounds, genders, and race.
What is Counter-Strike Global Offensive? For the unfamiliar, it could look like your everyday, run-of-the-mill video game that's filled with violence, explosions, and guns. And to some extent, that is technically true. Counter-Strike is an online competitive first-person shooter, which is arguably the most popular game genre today, being utilized by mainstream franchises such as Overwatch and Call of Duty. Many people unfamiliar with the title will probably look at this game from an outside perspective and brush it off as just another video game that has nothing to contribute in the advancement of the cultural phenomena that is esports. And who could blame them? Counter-Strike is not particularly stylized visually, especially when you compare it to its competitors. Their graphics aren't impressive by any means, and the gameplay looks arguably simple and unoriginal. The game even technically started out as a modded version of another video game series called Half-Life. But you'd be dead wrong to say that the release of Counter-Strike isn't one of the most important games of all time, especially for esports. But how does a game like Counter-Strike have such a big audience? What is this game doing differently from the other titles that makes it so much more popular amongst professional players and fans alike compared to other games? Counter-Strike uses its simple gameplay to its advantage. The creators of the game designed it to cater to a newer and unfamiliar audience, all the while still staying entertaining and intricate enough for longtime fans. It's easy to start watching the game and immediately pick up on what's going on and who's winning. And with video streaming services such as YouTube and Twitch, it's easier than ever to jump into the fandom and watch the pros play. Many credit Counter-Strike's popularity to the fact that it's so easily accessible to a general audience. You don't need a top-of-the-line PC or any other inaccessible gaming hardware to play the game. Thus, the player pool grew exponentially. The rise in the game's population gave way for a competitive scene that showcased how high a skill ceiling can be for a game like this. Top players in Counter-Strike such as coldzera, Nico, and Rain have an ability to play the game in a way that a vast majority of the audience cannot accomplish, just like real-life athletes compared to amateurs. Because of this, millions of people will subscribe and even pay real money just to watch their gameplay. It's similar to why anyone would want to watch baseball or football, or any other sport really. The excitement fans of the NFL get from watching a seemingly impossible play is the same feeling that Counter-Strike fans get from watching top players perform in the Pro League. Making a connection of watching video games and watching real-life sports may seem like a stretch. However, The level of excitement and entertainment they bring is much more comparable when you juxtapose real-life plays like this.
Alexis at the back post, but it's Messi! Are you kidding me? This is off the charts again! Brilliant from Messi! He can do it!
To this.
He's going to hit the ground there as Cole. Oh, what? A jumping double from Cole! What is going on right now? How does he do this? Cole is safely velocity.
Many critics of this game, and esports in general, say that video games will never reach a high viewership like the other professional sport leagues, and that's wrong to compare the two. However, in the most recent Counter-Strike tournament, it was able to rack up close to 2 million people watching in the finals and had a total of 64 million views over the span of its entirety. The tournament had 24 professional sponsored teams and competed for $1 million prize pool. Looking at the stadiums that were completely filled with screaming fans, it's clear that esports and real-life sports share a lot of the same traits that attract a similar demographic of viewers. Some franchises such as Buffalo Wild Wings even showcase the entirety of last year's tournament in their restaurant, which seems slightly jarring but is clear evidence that this is the beginning of a convergence between real sport and esport viewership. Now, why does this game really matter in the grand scheme of all things esports? Because this game is an example to the world of how big esports gaming can really be. The amount of fans that tune in to watch every tournament and amount of money that circulates through the various pro leagues is proof that video games are headed towards a direction of fandom that will match and possibly surpass some real sports one day. If there's any doubt in your mind that esports will never be big or it's unimportant, then CSGO is the perfect example of why you're wrong.
Technology has hit a point of advancement that it is slowly replacing some of the aspects of our lives. This is happening globally, with the number and frequency of people, especially the young, ever increasing. Some of the players are showing the classic signs and symptoms of addiction, not to the usual vices, but to video games. The alternate reality video games offers to some is an escape in what is sometimes a confusing and uncertain times for kids and teens. Addiction is defined by the American Medical Association as a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Dysfunction in these circuits lead to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. This is reflected in an individual pathology pursuing reward and/or relief by substance use and other behaviors. The inability to consistently abstain, impairment in behavioral control, craving, diminished recognition of significant problems with one's behaviors and in personal relationships, and a dysfunctional emotional response. Addiction to video games may sound like a far-fetched fantasy. However, compulsive gaming online has forced countries like China and South Korea to not only open treatment facilities, but in the case of South Korea, even limit the hours that certain ages can play online games, known as the shutdown or Cinderella Law. This law prohibits children from under the age of 16 from online gaming between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. Despite this law, many children find ways around this by using stolen, fake, or identity theft to obtain registration numbers. In South Korea and around the world, the vivid alternative reality that some games offer have made it difficult for youth to disconnect from or even sometimes distinguish between what is reality or not. Dr. Angela Ortiz de Gotari was a master's student in Stockholm, Sweden, researching internet addictions. "I'm not a hardcore gamer," she said, "but I used to play." Angelica picked up Resident Evil, a game where you fend off zombies, and played for research. She found herself in a grocery store one day and looked down the aisle at a distant item. She was involuntarily trying to call up a sniper scope to see further, just as she would in the game. She coined this term as game transfer phenomena. As this popularity of online games grows and the alternate realities increase, the number and frequency of addiction and disconnection will increase. A 2-year-long research project by Dr. Douglas A. Hentiel examined video game usage rates of 3,034 children and teenagers and found the following. The average length of time spent playing video games was 20 hours per week. An estimated 72% of American households played video games. An estimated 9% of the 3,034 participants in the study showed signs of video game addiction. 4% of of study patients were categorized as extreme users who play video games 50 hours per week on average. What is the solution? As technology is ever improving and the video game and online gaming becomes more immersive, a balance between reality and fiction is imperative. Direct human interaction is still required to be a healthy, functioning member of society, and addiction of any kind needs comprehensive treatment.
The money and business of esports today is extremely lucrative. Everyone is looking to find a way in. Esports is experiencing massive growth while still being in its early stage. According to Statista, the market is expected to generate over 1.48 billion US dollars and continue to grow at a 32% rate. The revenue from esports comes from prize pools, tournaments, sponsorships, investors, and advertising. Currently, esports is one of the fastest, most booming industries in the world today, but it always wasn't like that, and it had its fair share of humble beginnings. Some of the top players today easily make 6 to 7 figure salaries. This does not even include some of the money that they make their own earnings from streaming and making video content. But initially, in the early years of gaming, some players were lucky to even make around 4 to 5 figure salaries. You can witness the growth of these tournament events today as they fill up venues such as Madison Times Square Garden, and these events are so huge that you can see the viewership reach levels that even surpass the NBA Finals. As you can see, many popular brands are trying to involve themselves and get noticed through sponsorships. Many of these brands are very well known, and they're looking to find their way in the money market of esports. Some of these sponsors and brands, such as Intel, Coca-Cola, T-Mobile, HTC, Geico, and more. As you can see, big sponsors are listed on the players' jerseys, or players are known to use the sponsors' products and help promote them. Sponsors are also listed on personal streaming websites or YouTube channels, and players also make promotional videos or content. Sponsorships was one of the earliest ways in which esports have gained a stable form of funding. Because the esports industry has been rapidly growing, many investors have started to notice and began buying out esports teams. There are many popular celebrities, sports teams, and famous athletes that have begun buying out or making their own brands. Examples include Shaquille O'Neal being co-owner of NRG Esports, who have popular Overwatch and CSGO teams. Rick Fox, former LA star, is the owner of the esports team EchoFox, which has a strong presence in the League of Legends and Smash Bros. Scene. Magic Johnson is also an investor in the esports team Liquid, and other non-sports celebrities include Ashton Kutcher and Steve Aoki. Former players of the New York Yankees and White Sox have also invested. Many sports teams have invested, such as the Philadelphia 76ers, Cleveland Cavaliers, and more. These top investors do not just stop at NBA stars and teams, but also across European esports teams as well, as they are currently being bought out by many famous football soccer teams. This economy of esports will only continue to grow as the years come.
Video games are currently extremely popular and are still continuing to grow, and many believe that esports are a part of the future of entertainment alongside other leagues such as the NBA and the NFL. There's a lot of community and media support behind esports. Video games such as Counter-Strike Go, League of Legends, and Overwatch are easily accessible and attracts many consumers. Companies and investors are noticing how profitable this area is and are trying to get involved. With the increasing popularity, people argue that there are negative effects such as addiction. However, video games and the competitive league are strongly supported by the community, and at some point it will reach the same level as major sports such as football and basketball.